Welcome to Summit University. Today our guest is Stephen Acuff. He's a best-selling author and lecturer on health and diet in Europe and the United States. Mr. Acuff specializes in the macrobiotic diet. He is an instructor at the Cushy Institutes in Massachusetts and a nutritional counselor at a medical clinic in Germany. He is also director of a macrobiotic center in Sweden. Mr. Acuff is here today to talk about Oriental diagnosis.
Well, good morning. I hope everybody is fresh and ready for another round of evaluating our health with techniques of macrobiotic diagnosis. After our afternoon session yesterday, which was very interesting to have closer contact to many of you, it was quite obvious that we need to work with that more, because this close interchange allows you to ask some of the important questions for you. Sometimes one question really clarifies a lot of doubt you have about how to do it right. So our plan today will be to start with some more theory, and then we'll go into our groups again. You can get together with different people, and as it worked out yesterday, the group I was working with got larger at each group, so that in the end we were just one big happy family. And that's okay too. So we'll just take it whichever way it comes. So this session today, I'd like to talk to you about emotional aspects of evaluating health. In the previous sessions, we've focused primarily on the physical signs. These can be shown in the basic constitution. They can be shown in the condition, as seen in the face, the hands, the eyes. And also, it's important when we think of holistic approaches that we don't exclude the emotional side of life. And macrobiotic understanding teaches us that our emotions are, in part, and sometimes largely, the result of the foods we eat. If any of you are interested in following this subject in more detail, I can recommend a very good book. It's by Mr. William Tara, T-A-R-A, who is a well-known macrobiotic teacher in this country. And his book is entitled Macrobiotics and Human Behavior. The book used to be published through a well-known publishing house here in the U.S., and in the meantime now he is giving it out himself. He has revised it and improved this latest edition, and you'll usually be able to get it in macrobiotic centers or places where macrobiotic food products are sold. The Cushy Foundation in Massachusetts sells it. Aside from macrobiotics, another good book you might want to take a look at is by Dr. Judith Wertman, W-R-T-M-A-N, from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. She has written an excellent book called Managing Mind and Mood Through Food. And she has the scientific background which shows us what happens to our emotions, what happens to our psychological side when we take highly refined carbohydrates like sugar, white flour. She shows what happens when we eat heavy protein foods, and all of this verified through scientific study at MIT. It's a fascinating book. It's put out by Rawson Publishers, R-A-W-S-O-N. And it's fun because there's no mention of macrobiotics in this book, but when you come from that direction, you can find a lot of verification of things that we have taken over from ancient Chinese understanding. So it's a very nice mixture of East and West. which is the way it should be. And with those two books, you'll be able to go much more in depth than what I will present today, but I will give you the most important aspects today, from my point of view, most important in understanding this connection of emotions and how we use that to understand our conditions. It is the basic principle of macrobiotic teaching that we are supposed to be happy and optimistic and energetic people. We should enjoy life, we should enjoy the people around us, and we should find it easy to harmonize with the people around us. We should find it easy to involve ourselves in the problems of other people, to try to help them. And macrobiotics teaches us that through health, our perspective is directed towards the outside. So we're less directed towards the inside. That means not always so concerned with our own condition, but that we have an excess that we can give out to other people to solve problems, to help other people with their problems. The more health problems we get, the more our perspective will be turned inside. We'll be involved with our own intestinal condition, we'll be involved with our allergies, because they keep us from experiencing life as the wonderful experiment and fun that it should be. And as our health improves, we find we have this excess which automatically can be turned to the outside. And then we become more actively involved in the world around us and changing things for the better. So, a better world where people live more harmoniously and live more peacefully together is only possible if the people are projecting a healthy energy out of their own conditions to the world around them. So this is the optimal state, and we find that today more and more people are being held up by their health problems. They don't have that excess. And this detracts from their ability to make a positive contribution to our world and to their own personal development. So, when we understand that health and a positive, open attitude to life, that this is the basis of health, then we can look at what happens when we don't encounter those attitudes, but rather negative forces, and to understand where those come from. Now, I wouldn't be so naive as to say that all negative emotions are just coming from imbalances created by food, but our organs are, to a large extent, dependent on the food which we take into our bodies every day. People who deal with blood tests and some of the more sophisticated alternative blood examinations that are possible today can very quickly confirm very immediate changes in our blood quality just from one single meal. And Dr. Wertman points out that one single meal is enough to change our blood chemistry, enough to create changes in our psychological condition. Now, those who eat macrobiotically will not find this information to be anything new. We know that a meal that contains sugar will make us feel out of balance. One meal. We know that a meal with heavy fats or large protein, it gives us a different feeling than if we're eating whole grains and vegetables with plant protein, maybe occasional fish, but in general, a vegetarian-oriented food. We can feel the lightness. We know that this is true. So, what we can see then in the people around us and in ourselves is that certain organs will either give us a contribution to this health balance, or it will hold us up. And there's a couple of examples. One of the most direct relationships between organs in our body and our behavior is the liver. In English, as well as the other languages that I speak, there are slang expressions which connect the liver with a certain kind of behavior. In English, we can say, "That really got my gall up." In German and Swedish, we also have some very interesting expressions which give the same connection. The Japanese use the word liver disturbance to express the word anger. So, you can easily see where I'm going with this. That if our liver is balanced, it's functioning properly, it's not overloaded, we will not easily become angry. I'm sure many of you understand the effects which anger has on our bodies. It is not only something which can create a temporary negative situation, but it has also longer-term effects on our health, both physically and spiritually. And one of our greatest tasks in life is to try to pacify anger. Now, there are many ways you can do this. There are meditation techniques, there is spiritual insight, but interestingly enough, right in front of our nose, there is food which will tend to make us easily become angry or have more patience. So patience is a sign of a healthy liver. People who are very patient. Patience means not easily becoming angry. It means understanding other people's shortcomings and understanding that these people are dealing with their own problems, but that we don't feel personally attacked by it, or we don't feel personally irritated by it. So I have found in my travels, as I mentioned in the previous session, that in some countries the liver tends to get tighter than in others. And I really enjoy all of my work and activities in Germany, but in this country I have seen that the liver is tighter than in other countries I've visited. This means that there is a tendency for people easily to get angry. I remember a few months ago I had some bottles of mineral water which I had taken with me in my car to Sweden, and being very picky about ecological matters, I always make sure I don't throw away returnable bottles. So I made sure I got all these bottles in my car. When I drove back to Germany, I had a box load of bottles. I walked into a shop and wanted to return them, but the brand was not the kind that this shop carried. And as I put the bottles up on the counter, the woman looked at me and she said, "What am I supposed to do with those? Make a chain out of them and hang them around my neck?" So this is a sign of a bad liver. Now, if I'm aware of that, then I don't take it too seriously. I think, oh, this poor woman, imagine, 50 to 60 years old and she hasn't understood more in life than this? But if I didn't have this understanding, I would think, oh, who does she think she is? Talking to me, the customer, like that. So then I get angry. So nobody is served by this situation. But by having this understanding, it gives a very nice detachment from the situation. And with this reaction, you can imagine the first thing I did was to carefully examine the wrinkles between her eyebrows. And they were very deep. So I've experienced several such situations. I can't imagine a situation like this in Sweden. I really can't. And this is something which is very interesting if you travel internationally. You'll see that there are aspects. Scandinavians in general consider Germans to be people with more, let's say, more drive to succeed. They're like they take life very seriously. And there's something to that. And that has a very positive side. Germany picked itself up out of the ashes of the Second World War and has a currency which is very stable and one of the world's most important. A great accomplishment. But there's a front and back to everything. So when we look around, we see some people have more patience, others don't. And when we look at ourselves, if we see that we tend to get angry over other people's shortcomings, then we should think about developing ourselves on many levels, but let's also think about the liver. And the liver gets tight from wrong food. It gets tight, number one, by eating too much fat. When you eat excess fat, the liver stores these excess fat cells, and the liver tends to expand, and that makes it hard. Because I like to check livers when I do my counseling, I just feel along the edge of the rib cage on the right side, not the left, and you can very quickly find out generally how the liver is doing. I would say that in Germany, about 2/3 of the adults have what I would call an expanded hard liver. In other countries, it's not a lot better, but let's say that it's a very common problem and is one of the reasons for aggressions and the kind of tenseness we feel in people. When I was in Israel a few years ago on a lecture tour, I found the Israelis to be extremely tense, and this is not only because of their very precarious political situation, but also when I did counseling, I found the liver to be very tight. Found people yelling at each other on the streets for small violations of the code of conduct and very inappropriate behavior. And this is the next point, is anger in itself is not really, in general, the problem. It's the kind of anger. There are some things which happen in the world which make me angry. I used to get very angry when I would travel through no man's land between East and West Germany and see the guard towers and see the minefields and think of the people who were blown up trying to escape from East Germany, who lost their legs when they stepped on mines. That made me angry. But that's not a sign of a bad liver. Sign of a bad liver is if my car won't start and I get out and start kicking the tires. That's a bad liver. As if the car had made a conscious decision to make life difficult for me today. So we always put this in the perspective of appropriate behavior, which means it's a very subjective judgment. So, if we are in balance, we'll find that we also then have the capacity to be, well, let's say, to see the humorous side of life. So one side of a healthy liver is patience, the other is good humor. So if you meet people who easily can see the light, humorous side of life, then this is a sign that liver is not really one of their problems. Even if you see some of the wrinkles we talked about before between the eyebrows, a very calm, light, patient attitude gives insight even deeper than the wrinkles on the forehead as to how the liver is doing. Because I'll also remind you of one thing we talked about earlier, that sometimes people will recover the condition of the liver and the wrinkles will still show. Once they get ingrained, they don't disappear easily. But you can, from the deepness, you can still use it as a diagnostic tool. It's interesting also that the liver is the organ which has the best possibilities of repairing itself and regenerating itself. Some people have operations in the liver and it actually grows back. It's like chives. You just cut them off and it grows back. So this is a fantastic organ, the liver. And in the Chinese book, The Yellow Emperor's Classic of Medicine, the liver is given a very important role in the body. So, liver is especially burdened by excess fat. I have seen several times people with cancer metastases in the liver. Now, because the liver is a clearing organ, it is a favorite target of metastasized cancer cells. So the person gets breast cancer or intestinal cancer, and very often in these cases, the place where the metastases set are in the liver. And I have had several cases where people had a lot of pain in the liver, and as soon as they started eating our kind of food, within a couple of days, the liver pains were gone. And you can imagine why. Metastases take up space when they start crowding out important body functions. And when the liver starts getting crowded out, the person's in big trouble. If you get rid of these excess fat cells out of the liver, you start making more space for the metastases. And the pains go away, the liver can function better. Of course, it's also important to strengthen the immune system so you can stop the metastases, because they are, in the end, generally the cause of death in tumor cancer cases. It's usually not the original cancer which kills, but rather the metastases which come later, which are very difficult to diagnose in the first round of cancer. So very often I'm dealing with people with metastasized liver cancer, and I find, first of all, that when the liver gets tight, and then especially in a situation of cancer spreading to the liver, there is a tendency to be a little tense, a little bit of tenseness. You know, a typical example of liver condition would be, I'm telling the person now how to eat to get rid of this excess fat so that the pains go away. And there'll come a comment like, when am I supposed to do all this cooking? So a comment like that shows, you know, a lot of inner tension there. You know, and instead of saying, you know, what kind of idiot is this? You know, he's got cancer and he doesn't understand he has to do something about it. Instead of having that attitude, you know, we just realize, you know, this person is obviously tense. If I had those kind of things in my liver, I might react equally tense. Then we can just relax in the situation, and it helps to defuse these kind of situations. So, interestingly also, the liver deals a lot with environmental poisons. So if people are having a lot of liver problems, it's especially important, although it's important for everyone in general, especially important to create a toxic-free environment. There are some excellent books out telling us about a toxic-free house, how you get rid of your formaldehyde carpets and your poisonous paint fumes and your plastics and all these things which are a constant burden to the liver. So, very, very important. Now, when we see problems of tension and anger, impatience, it doesn't always have to come out as anger, it can be just impatience, then we would recommend especially leafy green vegetables, because leafy green vegetables have that upward energy, that lightness that the liver needs. From a previous session, you probably remember we talked about the liver being nourished by Earth's force, coming out of the Earth, moving up. So that's very good. Also things like sprouts are very good. But going easy on the salt, easy on heavy baked things, and easy on the oil and fat. Also, the liver is involved in protein metabolism. So we want to also go easy on the protein. In other words, the general macrobiotic recommendations are very good for the liver. Then we have another important organ. That is the kidney, or the kidneys. The kidneys are also very pivotal for our emotional balance. The kidneys are the driving force of life, of our physical life here on Earth. According to the Chinese, they are the residents of our physical qi. Our ancestral energy and our physical energy resides in the kidneys. It is the basis also for our reproductive power, everything that has to do with earthly life. The kidneys are almost like a couple of hands just pushing us through life. We're just moving forward. So this forward movement is typical for kidney strength. It means especially being curious. Being curious about things and checking into things. It's not getting stuck in just old habits. Sign of kidney strength is, in other words, what the Chinese call courage. Because to move into new areas always requires a certain amount of courage. It's giving up the complacency and the lazy comfort of what we know, our habits, and trying something new. We discover a new idea, and so we're curious to check it out. Is there something to this? And not get bogged down with prejudices, but rather going at a new idea as if this was the first time you ever considered anything like this, and you have no prejudices which affect your judgment of it. So courage and curiosity and forward movement in life, those are signs of strong kidneys. And if we feel that we see life as a challenge, and we like to get into it, we like to be engaged in this challenge of life, then even if we do have the bags under the eyes, which show physically that something's weak in the kidneys, this is still not a major problem. So this is a way of getting that balance in our judgment, so we don't make half-baked conclusions about the health condition. So it's very good if we can have a little more time to meet people, to talk to them, and get a feeling for what kind of personality is here before us. Now, unfortunately, in our day and age, strong kidneys are becoming a rarity. In any case, the majority of people are burdening their kidneys. You may be aware that the kidneys, during the course of our life, are gradually destroyed more and more year for year. In the U.S., the average 70-year-old person, I think, has only about 50% kidney capacity left. %50 capacity of his kidneys are left at the age of 70 because he has taken the wrong food choices through the years and kidney function breaks down more and more. The kidneys are unfortunately not able to regenerate themselves as the liver is. So lost kidney function is very difficult to recoup. But that's why we were given 2 of them. Because it takes about, let's say it takes a burden which will bring kidney function down to about 25% before you will have overt kidney symptoms. So if you see bags under the eyes, which we've had as our classic example of kidney weakness, and you tell someone, I think you've got kidney weakness, a very common comment is, but I've never had any problems with my kidneys. Because people assume that first when problems reach the symptom level, do you have a problem? But actually problems are going long before that. You can be suffering from arthritis, and this may be coming from your kidneys, but you're not feeling the pain in your kidneys, but it's coming from the kidneys, the disturbance. So the easiest way to damage our kidneys is to eat excess protein. This is a scientific fact. And if we eat the amount of protein that is common today, which goes over 100 grams a day, 100, 120 up to 150 grams a day, this will damage kidneys. Scientific research has shown that anything over 80 or 90 grams a day is detrimental to kidney function. I would say macrobiotic food, if you follow the recommendations, in general you'll be around 40 to 50 grams. If you like to eat tofu, you might come up to 80 grams. But in general, excess protein is not so much a problem for us as it is for people eating normal food. So when this imbalance comes, the kidneys get weak, then the stage is set for the opposite of courage, and that is fear. Fear is running rampant in our society. Are you aware of how many preventive breast amputations are going on in this country? Women whose mothers or sisters have had breast cancer, and they are so seized by fear that they allow their healthy breasts to be amputated so that they can't get breast cancer. This sounds very strange to you. You'd be surprised to see how common it is becoming. 2 years ago, Time magazine had a cover article on breast cancer and told about how popular this is becoming. They showed a woman with 2 older sisters. Both older sisters had breast cancer. The youngest sister had both her breasts removed. She said now she can sleep at night. This is fear. And it comes from thinking that these kind of diseases just strike us as an unjust stroke of fate, and that we have no control over the situation. That's a pretty scary situation when you think, genetically, I'm doomed to this. So let's cut it off so nothing can happen. But the real tragedy is that such an operation will weaken your immune system to the point that you become more susceptible to cancer. It doesn't have to come out in the breast, it can come out somewhere else. But this is becoming more and more common, and even a member of my own family, a greater family, one of my cousins has actually taken this step. Fear. So kidneys are related to fear, and when we see people reacting fearfully, afraid of change, see especially people that don't like to experiment at all, they're not curious, they like to just stay in the realm of the things they know. There's no interest in going beyond what we're doing now and getting into new things and more exciting things and accelerated activities. So fear, and that means that instead of having this forward movement in life, we're starting to hesitate. Well, I don't know. Now, wait a minute. Because you have an intuitive understanding. Your adrenal glands are right next to the kidneys. In fact, in German and Swedish, they're called next to the kidneys. They're not called adrenals. And when your kidney strength is down, your body intuitively becomes fearful because your body has the feeling we can't deal with sudden crises now. If something pops up, you know, this that's sometimes called the fight or flight response. If something comes up quickly, we have to be able to respond. When you've got strong adrenals, like if suddenly the doors were to burst open and a tiger comes lurching into the room, then we would, you know, immediately feel this adrenaline rush. And that would require immediate response on our part. Now, if you've got strong kidneys and next to kidneys, the adrenals, then your body intuitively knows that it's prepared to deal with uncertain and new situations. So there's an intuitive security. But when this function gets disturbed, then your body is telling you we can't really handle new situations if something pops up. So let's take it easy. Let's hold back a little bit. Let's go very cautiously forward. So being cautious can be proper. And as I said in our previous example with anger, fear sometimes can be proper if the fear is justified. I spent some time in Vietnam as a member of the U.S. Army, and I know what fear is, but that was not a sign of bad kidneys. That was a matter of life and death. But if I'm fearful to stand in front of people, everybody's looking at me, then that's more a sign of kidney weakness. You can spot the kidney people sometimes if you walk into, say, a restaurant and there's a table all the way in the corner, and the people, like if you're a waitress, you would see this. Say a person who comes in regularly, and they always like to sit in the back with the wall behind them so they can watch everything. That would be a sign of kidney weakness, showing they feel more comfortable when there's nothing can come up from behind. Because there's a certain amount of physical insecurity there about their ability to deal with new situations. So we can also see kidney weakness if people stand with this posture. I mentioned this once before, but I'll just repeat it since we're talking about the kidneys. You'll see people maybe walking with their dog or something, and every time they stop, they like to do this. And this is a kind of hand energy, palm healing on weak kidneys. That it feels good when you do this. Lower back things. While I'm on the subject of posture here, I might mention one thing, going back a step to the liver. That is, that if you see people standing like this, or they make fists, this making fists, crossing your arms and making fists, you can see the tension in their fist. This is what we would call a tense liver, overly yawn condition. Sometimes the tension of the liver is also shown if people grind their teeth, tend to grind their teeth, or they tend, if situations occur which might make them angry, but they try to suppress their anger. They just suppress it, but you see the tension in them anyway. They will clench their fists, or they'll grit their teeth. No, I'm not angry. Oh, I said it's okay. So, for the kidneys, then it's important to keep them warm. If they're weak kidneys, they should always be kept warm. I mentioned this in an earlier session, just repeating it so you keep that in mind. Then we'll go on to another organ, the spleen, and its twin organ, the pancreas. spleen pancreas. I mentioned in an earlier session that the spleen pancreas is considered to be earth energy or soil energy. It's our very basic energy in Chinese medicine, and it has a lot to do with our ability to use the resources available in our bodies, much the same as the earth is the source of our nourishment. The spleen and pancreas, and they're also accompanied by the stomach, that the spleen-pancreas function is very much guiding for our ability to be in balance with our own resources that we have in our bodies. In other words, using the nutrients and having the energy necessary to complete our daily activities. So if we have this energy, if we have proper functioning spleen, pancreas, energy, stomach, then there is a smooth transfer of the nutrient energy into our physical energy. One example is blood sugar. Carbohydrates being changed into blood sugar, the blood sugar being the energy that gives us our daily spark. That if this is in order, then we have abundance, and we have so much abundance that we can bring this towards the outside. This is much like what I was talking about in my introduction today. This is a sign of good soil or earth energy having this ability to give out. And the Chinese call this compassion. People who are compassionate for others have strong spleen, pancreas energy. Buddha was considered the passionate one, the compassionate one. Compassion. Through inner balance, the ability to give out to others. Compassion. And the Bodhisattva, or the person on the path to Buddha conscience, was one who had the ability to contribute to the problems of others, contribute to the solutions of the problems of others, could contribute to solving problems, to minimizing or eliminating, reducing suffering. So, what happens if this energy is not in order? Let's say the spleen, pancreas are not functioning well. You have blood sugar problems. The afternoons are difficult to handle without sweets or coffee. This is a sign that these energies are not in balance. And because we don't have that excess, now we have to draw on other people's compassion. So this was considered an imbalance then, self-pity. In other words, instead of giving out the compassion to others, we need the compassion of others. Now, there's nothing wrong with needing help from other people. We all have our problems in life, and it is a challenge. But this would be a set pattern of someone who is always looking for pity from others, and often not really interested in solutions. That's the difference. Looking for help is a sign of health, actually. It's a sign of clarity of thought in any case. But it's people that are more interested in getting the pity than in getting the information that will help them recover. And this is one of our big problems we have in our counseling. And it's been one of the very interesting experiences for me in speaking to people in this community that I have not found that to be a problem, which is quite different from my counseling at large. I've found the interest in this community to be very much technically oriented to finding out how to make the system work for better health. But in my counseling in general, very often, I find people that are more interested just in having someone who will pity them and listen to their complaints, and they will spend the entire counseling session really pulling for that pity. Poor you. And of course, some people are suffering very much, and you do feel a certain amount of pity for them, especially because they don't have the clarity to do something about it. But the problem is there, and the pity doesn't bring you very far. So if you have the opportunity to find out how to solve a problem, then you get into the solution and work on it. So this is a big problem today. More and more unclarity about finding solutions to our problems, and this is related to this energy. Now also, there can be a tendency to very strong suspicion, negative things like suspicion or overly sarcastic. That kind of attitude can also develop. There's nothing wrong with a good, healthy sarcasm, of course. You know, it's one of our forms of humor and can be a very good weapon in verbal debates. But when a person tends to be overly sarcastic, this is a sign that their inner condition is not balanced. Then we have the lungs. And the lungs are also related to the large intestine, as we've had in earlier sessions, but the lung is the more active organ. It's the organ that is constantly pulsating, giving off carbon dioxide, taking in oxygen. And a couple of traits are very noticeable if the person has strength in the lungs. This is number one, positive attitude and optimism. Positive means the ability to deal with challenges and dilemmas and get into finding solutions. So every day we find certain challenges, and now and then we have real dilemmas to deal with. Some of us have more than others. When these dilemmas come up, we have to be able to find solutions. So with strong lung power, you will tend to very quickly think of what are my options and which one is the best. The former German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt was very well known that every time a dilemma came up, he immediately took out a piece of paper and he wrote a positive sign on one side, a negative on the other, and he started writing down all of the positive and negative things about his options. And he looked at those and then chose the one that had the most positive and the least negative. Well, that's a sign of good lung energy. It's not being bogged down, but always looking for those solutions, getting through. It's like being also decisive. That's decisiveness. Now we can very easily understand why that happens. Remember in an earlier session, I pointed out a postural form which shows tendency to weak lungs. If you stand along a street corner sometime in a town where there are traffic lights and you see the pedestrians waiting for the little green walking man, then you'll see people standing there like this. And if somebody is standing there like this, you would probably think he's probably into yoga, or he's going to Wilhelm Reich breath therapy or something. He's doing something because he doesn't look normal. Because people tend to sag here, and if you sag down, you'll find it very difficult to breathe properly. In fact, you can only breathe very shallow. Now, oxygen is very important for brain function. Your brain is the greatest consumer of oxygen in your body. And the more oxygen you have in your body, the better your brain and central nervous system can function. So many people know that if this were a very small room and we were to sit here for 4 hours without going outside, the air could become more and more stale, meaning less oxygen, and regardless of how interesting the topic might be, people would have difficulty focusing their nervous systems on the subject You see a lot of sleepiness, drowsiness, sluggishness. And if you have weak lungs and you tend forward, you'll always be going a little bit in the direction of oxygen starvation. So taking time for breathing is very good. Now, if you enjoy chanting, you already there are getting a good oxygenation, because by doing chanting, you can get all of that air out so that when you take in the next breath of oxygen, all the carbon dioxide is out. So this in itself is very good for giving clarity. And there was done an interesting experiment some years ago I read about, where some test persons were put into a chamber, an air chamber, where they reduced the oxygen content from 20%, which is what this air would be in the normal conditions. That's what the air around us has, is 20% oxygen. They reduced it to 10% and had the people just sit there for a while. And then they noted what happened to them. Can you imagine what happened? Yeah, they became somewhat sluggish, less alert, but especially they found that people tended to becoming depressed, depressions. The opposite of positive, optimistic attitude is tendency to depression or negative, just being negative about things. See, if you can say, "Oh, what a beautiful day," and someone will say, "Yeah, we've had too many of them. We need some rain." That would be a sign of problems in the area of lung, large intestine, because there's a negative attitude there. And there are some people who will always come up with a negative comment. If you think about it, you may even know such people. I meet them all the time. Spend an hour in counseling with them, and they will come up with a negative comment on everything you say. So you have to do it like this. My children will never go along with this. And on and on. There's a negative objection to everything you say. And of course, there can be problems with children going along with what the parents are doing. That's not the point. The point is the attitude behind the statement. So, negative depression or the inability to take decisions. This is weaker lung energy, need for more oxygen. Now, breathing exercises are one side of it, but what happens with people who eat a lot of dairy food? They clog up. On a telephone, you can recognize someone who likes to eat a lot of dairy food. You can hear it on their voice over a telephone. You don't even have to have them before you. They sound like they're speaking through a pipe somewhere that's not very clean. It's like the voice comes through because, the nasal passages are blocked. There's a lot of mucus forming in the whole area. And many people notice that when they become aware of it. Yes, every time I take dairy food, I notice there's a lot of mucus formation in my throat. And this gathers in the air passages, so that even if you're doing the best Wilhelm Reich, you probably know of him and his breathing therapies. If you're doing the best kind of Reich breathing therapy, which can be very powerful, you won't get very far if your lungs are clogged with mucus. Now, most people have both disadvantages. They're not only breathing improperly, they not only have an improper posture, making it impossible to breathe properly, but their lungs are clogged with mucus from excess dairy food, just to mention one example. So, by eating proper food, our lungs clean out. And we start taking in the oxygen better, and we just pick up. We start seeing the positive side of life more easily. I don't know how many people I have seen in counseling who tell me that they started this kind of food because they had physical problems, and they're amazed at how much they change emotionally. They weren't even expecting that. They were expecting to get rid of their arthritic pains or their hay fever, or to try to stop maybe even more severe diseases like diabetes. But they didn't count on becoming calmer, more peaceful, more at ease with themselves and with their surroundings. And this is one of the big things, is changing this negative into positive. But sometimes it can also be in other areas like the liver. Being very picky about things is liver. And through the change in food, some people notice that they become less picky. My mother-in-law, for example, is an interesting person. I hope she never sees this film. But she's a very dear person. She likes to knit sweaters for me, and she's great. But it's very interesting when we look at her with our magic spectacles, we see that she can walk into her living room, and if someone has taken out a book out of the bookshelf and looked at it and put it back in the shelf, not where it was before, she sees it immediately. You know? She just has this radar vision that everything in the room is as it should be. And that's really a sign of liver imbalance. The need to loosen up, this very pickiness. So for some people it will become just relaxing about those things. I hear many people that will tell me, I used to be so picky and I got so upset about small things. Now it just doesn't bother me. I find the most interesting examples are people who aren't even there for their own health reasons, but because their partners are sick. A very common example is a wife who comes with a husband who has cancer, and the wife will eat the food with him to support him so that he can stay with it. And when I see them again, she will tell me that she went into this with no expectations at all, and that she especially notices that she's become a much calmer person, less depressive, less picky, less indecisive, less self-pitying, all of these aspects. So always very interesting to hear these, because usually if I speak about this subject in Europe, I find that the wild imagination theory is very popular. That if I say that through food you can become more calm, happier, that people will say, well, how do you know that? Well, I have met many people who have done it, and they will, it's guaranteed, they'll say this. Well, they just expect to get better. They're eating this because it's healthier, so they imagine that it's helping them, but it's not really. See, they know that, even though they have no experience with it. So, when you have these examples of people who have no expectations, I'm just eating it because my husband's doing this, and, you know, I don't know. And then they say, this is amazing, I feel so much different. Well, if you know about what happens to the biochemistry of the brain, this is not a big mystery. And so I hope you have a chance to read Wertmann's book about all the things that go on in the brain when you eat different foods. There's something called serotonin, or serotonin in English. It is a biochemical substance in the brain which produces a feeling of calm, peacefulness, of balance. And when we eat complex carbohydrates, this is the idea in the Wertmann book, when we eat these complex carbohydrates, there is a elevated level of this biochemical substance, serotonin. I'm not sure exactly how we spell it in English, but in Swedish and German we spell it S-E-R-O-T-O-N-I-N. Same in English? Okay. So, it's been a long time since I read the book. Anyway, the balance in the brain is dependent on this substance. And if you take complex carbohydrates, it comes up and it stays there and you feel good. If you eat sugar, because it will be produced from all carbohydrates, if you eat sugar, it will give a quick increase of serotonin, but because it goes up very fast and it's just a quick sugar, it drops off again. And Workman points out that many people who eat sugar and can't stop eating it are actually addicted to this feeling they get. And so they'll eat sugar, they'll get a feeling of well-being, which is very fleeting. It's gone very quickly. And so then they're ready for the next dose. And so they get into a vicious circle. But by eating complex carbohydrates, we have more emotional balance. Now, the last organ we want to talk about here is the heart. Very important organ, very central to our existence. And the heart has a rhythm, just always pumping for us day and night, always there. And interestingly enough, our body cells are very dependent on this rhythm. The body cells almost sense the rhythm. Researchers have, with electrodes, just with a fraction of a second, changed the heartbeat and have discovered that the body breaks out in a kind of subconscious panic when it happens. So that the whole body is keyed to balance and this heart beating. And if this suddenly changes, the whole body knows, uh-oh, this is not good. This pump here is what keeps everything going. So, for the Chinese, the sign of a healthy heart, strong heart, is having a certain evenness, a certain rhythm to life, the ability to be in different situations and to be able to keep your rhythm harmonious with that situation. So it has a lot to do with like adaptability too. It's also with your emotions. It's interesting that the Chinese see this going two ways. At one point they say, if you express extreme anger, your liver is not in order. And they turn around and say, if you express extreme anger, you will damage your liver. It's liver damage. So it goes two ways. And it's the same with the heart. It's hard for us maybe to understand. The Chinese said that if you live a joyful life, if you experience joy in life, this is a sign of a healthy heart, being joyful, being happy and grateful for everything we're given in this life. But they say extreme joy is damaging to the heart. Like say, your favorite football team wins the Rose Bowl, and you jump around the room and scream and yell. This would be considered damaging to the heart. It's too much joy. It's getting too far out of balance. So keeping this kind of balance is part of healthy heart energy. It's having rhythm and it stays within certain limits. And you can imagine what the opposite is. Signs of heart imbalance are erratic behavior, unpredictable behavior. There's a certain positive aspect of being unpredictable. It makes the person extremely interesting because we can never really know what they're doing. But there's a point where unpredictability goes into the negative because it can create embarrassment, it can create a lot of negative situations when the person does not have his conduct under control. Or if the tendency is to express emotions in general too much in the extreme. So the ability to keep this in balance is a sign of heart, and the heart of strength, and coupled with that is the small intestine. Small intestine acupuncture is directly related to the heart. And when we think of the small intestines as being what the Japanese call hara, our physical center, it's kind of interesting that we have our spiritual center in the heart and our physical center in the hara, or our small intestinal area. So those are the major organs that decide in what condition we're in. So when we see people exhibiting this behavior, let's think about that too. And in closing, for this session, let's just think about a couple of other things, just basic yin and yang. Aside from these things, basic yin and yang. If a person expresses more aggressive kind of behavior, that's more yang. There's a certain positive part of aggressive behavior. That's the aggressiveness of going out into life and not being too shy when shyness is not called for. But again, it's the question of appropriateness, so it becomes a subjective decision. Is this proper aggressive? Which maybe the word aggressive itself sounds negative, but aggressive can be used also in a positive sense, I'm sure you can understand. The positive side of yin is adaptability and flexibility especially. So if you say, well, let's do it this way, someone says, but wait a minute, if we do that, that's going to happen. Let's do it this way. You think about it and say, you're actually right. I didn't think about that. Let's do it this way. That's very good yin energy. So the person should be a balance of yin and yang. Should have the ability to go out and say, wait a minute, let's not do it this way, because this is the problem. That's being the yang. And it's on the other hand, being able to be yin and say, yeah, you're right. I didn't think of that. So that's good yin and yang. You can imagine what the negative sides of those are. We find people who are overly aggressive or always want to be right. When you're talking to them, you can see they're not listening to what you're saying. They're waiting for you to stop talking so they can say what they want to say. They're just waiting. As soon as his lips stop moving, I'm going to say this. And they're not even listening, because they're basically just interested in going out and doing this. So you can see this especially of too yang in its imbalanced form when you say, Dad, after your second heart attack, don't you think it's time to really think about your cholesterol and your triglycerides and start getting into some healthier foods? Don't start this stuff. I can take care of myself perfectly fine. The doctors did a wonderful job, and I don't need your advice. This is overly yang. Overly yin, on the other hand, is always going along with the other person. Like just, you automatically assume that the other person has a better suggestion than you do. So, of course, how could I even think of such a thing? You're right. There are people who do that, or just, of course, you're right. I should change my food habits, but I'm too old to change. That's what we call more too yin. Nobody's too old to change. Of course, older people have a more difficult time changing totally, but everybody can change. I have seen 80-year-olds change. Everybody wants to be vibrant and healthy, even at an advanced age. Why not at 80? So, we have positive and negative sides and of both yin and yang, and we try to see how those balance. That we have positive yin, positive yang. We can listen, but we're also ready to give our input and not always waiting. Sometimes there's people like, if you think of just standing around and you don't really want to say your opinion because you don't know what the general opinion of the room is. So you'll wait until you hear people express their opinions, and then you'll carefully get into it. It's like, putting your toe in the water and kind of checking it out. What's the temperature in this room, And having the courage to stand for what you believe, that is more yang. And always holding back, that's too yin. On the other hand, always saying what you believe, regardless of the situation, is too yang. I have seen a situation, a person very convinced of macrobiotics, we're sitting at the table eating at a reception where both macrobiotic and non-macrobiotic food is being served, regular food. And as we're sitting there, this person sitting across from us, my friend says to him, "Do you know what that is doing to your blood vessels?" Now here, the person has the food right in front of him. He's eating his meal. He's trying to enjoy his meal. And this is much too young, Let him enjoy his meal, then we'll save the enlightenment work for later. So people who always come too late, more yin. People who always come too early, more yang. Or always coming right on time, more yang. People who spend money very easily, they can't keep money. They're too yin. This year at our Swedish summer camp, already in February, a man called up and says, "I want to come to your summer camp in June. I'm going to pay the money in today." And I said, "Well, that's okay. Actually, if you pay until April, it's fine. And even in May, if you're, don't have the money together." He says, no, I'm going to pay it in today because if I don't do that, I might not have the money. So when we hear this, we know automatically, too yin. Because if you're yang, you'll say, that money is for that, and I'm just not going to touch it. That's just it. And then people who don't like to spend anything. People who will go to 3 different shops to see what the price of something is, like maybe it's 10 cents cheaper there. Now, of course, when I say this, I'm taking into consideration some people are so hard-pressed economically that maybe that's the right thing for them to do. So I don't want to be arrogant and say that anybody who's very conscious with their money is too young. But you know what I'm talking about. It's like what we call the Scrooge attitude, being very, very tight with money, even if you have the money to spend, or being, say, overly thrifty. Thriftiness is a great virtue, and we, of course, appreciate that. But again, we're using this concept of appropriate behavior when we do our diagnosis. In other words, let's keep always common sense with these judgments, because everything can be turned around into something that isn't meant if we don't use common sense. So, on this common sense note, we'll conclude this session. Thank you.